hear me. If you're listening to this podcast, do not hesitate to spend more money. I can't reiterate that more. I wish we'd spent $100,000 if we had it before the campaign.
Master is a crowdfunding podcast. Today we have Marcus Veerman. He is the creator of Nüdel Pod. It's raised almost $310,000 Australian dollars. And the project was over 600% funded with over 800 backers. And Marcus, welcome to the podcast. Just share with the audience a little bit more about what the Nüdel Pod is.
Yeah, great to be here, Kevin. Thanks very much. So, in short, the Nüdel Pod is basically one little box about the size of 2 shoeboxes, I guess, if you can imagine that size, made out of wood. And it's one toy that has individualized loose parts that push together in really simple ways to essentially replace all of those large scale toys, which are cluttering up people's bedrooms. And it does a couple of good things. It gives the children all of the toys they could ever want without having a room full of single-use toys that clutter up their bedroom and stop the toys that they have from being used, right? Because toys, the thing that we forget is that toys need space. So clutter, when your bedroom or your lounge room is full of clutter, you don't actually use the toys well, and you get, it stresses parents out. They get dusty and filthy, and just maintaining and managing that is a nightmare. Kevin, you're going to have a baby soon, so you are well on the way of sort of understanding this. And I think the other thing is that it gives children loose parts, open-ended parts that they can then build their own crazy creations, which as they grow and sort of change and develop through their childhood, they can create toys and objects and furniture and things that meet their needs. So if they're like, if they're like super artistic, they can create a seating desk for drawing. They can create an easel or a standing table. And those tables and things can adjust as they get taller and older and things like that. Or if you've got super active kids, they can focus more on ride-ons and really, spinning tummy boards and all that other super active stuff. So you've got something that actually uniquely, individually caters to a child's needs.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for that introduction, Marcus. I mean, prior to that, you were the CEO, you still are the CEO of playgroundideas.org. When you and I first met back in 2022 now, which is crazy to think about, you had launched the Noodle Carts, and you sold 500 units of that product at $5,000 each, right? And so can you talk a little bit more about your background and how you got to the launch of your crowdfunding campaign?
Yeah, sure. So basically, if I go way back, basically my wife, when we got married a long time ago, for some of you, this is 2006. She said to me, I'm not going to marry you unless we can live overseas and do some development work for a longer period of time. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So at the time, I was running an amazing program with young people called Hands-On Learning, which basically got kids out of their classrooms and got them to build stuff, real things like full-size classrooms, like full construction projects. We were building, furniture for local council parks and doing bike maintenance and all this cool stuff. It was like before design, build, learning and that kind of stuff was in schools, we were doing that stuff. So we built our own workshop. It was really amazing. I went to Thailand after basically working as a mountain guide and outdoor education teacher, and then doing this hands-on learning stuff in schools. And for the first time, I had absolutely no idea, like not a clue what I was going to find when I landed in Thailand and what I was going to do. And after a little bit of mucking around, I was asked by a local organization if I could help, because they saw me sort of at a bit of a loose end, to build a playground. I did that. And then that converted to the construction of over 40 playgrounds on the Thai-Myanmar border, mainly for Karen, Chin and other refugees that had crossed the river there. There was a lot of village burnings, a lot of crazy stuff going on, and they would come to the other side of the border to these terrible, impoverished schools that didn't have any resources. And one of the things that they never got was a space to play. And I guess For me, coming from working with children in the mountains, I very deeply understood that children's early experiences in play and open-ended environments where they define what they do, and the outdoors are, there's obviously a lot of that, really taught me how important it is to create environments where children kind of get to choose their own adventure. And essentially, for young children, that's called play, right? So I sort of got a bit caught up and a bit, hyper-focused on this whole idea of play and playgrounds. Finished the 40 playgrounds, came home completely burnt out. That's burnout number one. Managed to get a bit of funding from a funder over here who'd funded me for the hands-on learning program years ago. And I said, I want to start a website where I share everything I've learned in Thailand, manuals, step-by-step instructions where I can create a world where anyone, anywhere can build a low-cost playground for kids, because I knew it wasn't a priority. It's a priority for kids, but it wasn't a priority for everyone else. They're thinking about the local market or the roads or flooding or whatever. They're not going to build a playground with the limited funds they got. And so that has grown exponentially for the last, about 15 years. We built 20 playgrounds in 2007, about 20 playgrounds in the first year of Playground Ideas. And then basically builders across the world have just taken off. There's now 15 organizations approximately around the world who are copying our designs and using our work and now extending on that and building playgrounds everywhere. So that builds a few hundred playgrounds a year. And then the website itself, I estimate, it's a bit hard to tell, but maybe between 700 to 1,000 projects every year are built. So that's somewhere between 4 and 5 million children have been impacted as a result of that. That was like scalable, entrepreneurial, non-profit thing first. From that experience, I then went on to build playgrounds all around the world. And the Noodle cart came in because I was sent to Timor-Leste. A lot of people know it as East Timor, one of the youngest countries on Earth in terms of its borders. It's separated from Indonesia in a pretty rough sort of separation. A government was giving a bunch of money, a Western government was giving a bunch of money to Timor to build 300 playgrounds around the country. And that project went not very well. For various reasons that I don't want to go into, the program didn't work very well, but some of the things were on us. It was really hard to go into an entire country that had all these different environments and to take that and then create playground designs, 2 or 3 simple playground designs, and create spaces that were in deep rainforest valleys, coastal environments, agricultural environments, hyper dense urban environments. It was just really hard. And so one of the things I'd done in some of the prototype playgrounds we built over there was to create loose parts boxes. And for all the good work I'd done in playgrounds around the world, the one thing that just blew my mind was the incredible creativity of children when they're given pieces that are not bolted to the ground and that can do all of this cool stuff. And also at that time, just randomly, this incredible designer from Belgium called Emma Ribbons got in contact and said, hey, I'm at a bit of a loose end. I've been walking into the Greek refugee camps, building, doing these loose parts play programs with Syrian refugees. Remember when all those Syrian refugees were crossing the Mediterranean to Greece, Turkey, and other places? It was just an absolute catastrophe, right? It was just kids, no parents, just people arriving on the shore, hundreds of them every day in boats, totally exhausted, half dead. She was walking into these places with a huge, literally, it's hard to explain, a massive cardboard box full of these loose parts. And she shared some of the videos and the photos, and I was just like, this is exactly what I'd seen in Timor. So from that experience, we set about going, well, what if we created a noodle, didn't have a name then. What if we created a box that you could roll into a refugee camp, into a poor community, literally anywhere in the world, flat packed, and you put it into their school and they would have a no compromises, incredible space that did this like mind-blowing stuff. Kids were just so creative. And when they were working with loose parts, you'd see physics and chemistry and all the sciences and STEM and language development go through the roof because they're collaborating with other people, all that entrepreneurial stuff that I loved. I could see it happening. I was like, this is amazing. So we did that. We we made a film, um, which we showed to a packed house at the International Documentary Film Festival here in Melbourne. From testing that with Syrian refugees in Lebanon as well, and it just kept getting better and better and better. And we're just more and more convinced of this idea. And then from that experience, we spent a ton of money testing. So we were running out of money, and I thought, but we still needed to test the kind of final prototype that we had. So I said, what if we test that in schools in Australia? And to my great surprise, we tested in 12 schools and 8 of them wanted to buy one. And that blew me away because we got to remember, I was totally in that charity mindset at that time. And then what happened was all of a sudden I was like, hang on a sec. If we had a market here in Australia, maybe in the US, I'm looking for someone in the US, by the way, and other places, could we create a model that was totally sustainable where we could sell noodle carts to schools in America, the US, the UK, Canada, Singapore, other places like that, Dubai, whatever. And then from that, create enough revenue that could run Playground Ideas, because Playground Ideas and just the world economy and charity, it's getting harder and harder to fund stuff because social enterprise had taken such a big chunk. And so I accidentally slipped into this kind of social enterprise that created the noodle cart. We launched that. That went really well. The first few years of it were mostly in COVID, which was not easy for a product that people touch and feel in schools, which were shut down. So that was hard. But the silver lining to that was then we created something called the Noodle Rover, which was a smaller model for early childhood centers and for occupational therapists and other people who work with children, created a smaller space, or for wellbeing teachers trying to help kids mitigate meltdowns when they were coming out of their classes or whatever. But bubbling away in the background was always this request that I'd had from East African Playgrounds, which is one of our partner organizations in Uganda, who'd said to me, these carts are great in schools, but one thing we've got funding for sometimes is like social emotional learning and support for parents at home. Could you create something that was smaller and for the home? And I'd kind of sort of thought about that idea before, but when I got that request, I was like, well, maybe there's something here. And so that was probably in about 2019, we're having those conversations. And the pod is easily the hardest thing we've ever done, because when you've got to condense something big into a tiny space, it's a little bit like that. I can't remember, sort of some famous US president who said, if you want me to talk for 2 hours, I'm ready now. If you want me to talk for 10 minutes, it's going to take me a while. And I think that principle is so true in everything. If you've got to condense value into a tiny thing, whether it's a 10-minute TED talk or a video reel or whatever now, to get that value in takes a huge amount of work to extract all of the waste and the flotsam and jetsam and to get that thing in there. And so that then became, I've actually just got one here. This is my little Noodle Pod right here. So yeah, that's condensing of all of that was the thing that took the most time. Anyway, so that's how we got here.
That's an incredible story. I mean, I got a little bit of that when we spoke in 2022 and 2023, but I had no idea. I mean, you told me that you had been working on it for 15 years, but I had no idea it was like to that extent and with that many organizations and that many stages along the way.
Been a long road. Yeah. But a good, we sort of have that fail fast and, learn, break things, whatever. Like it takes time to get, it just takes time to condense things into what actually matters and to remove what doesn't matter. Maybe some people are way better at doing that super quickly, but I think that experience, sometimes we lose the value of experiences, of having lots of experiences, those 10,000 hours of things to really refine something to bring it down to its essence.
Yeah. And I can definitely second, talking about a speech or a TED talk or something, that's one thing, right? I shouldn't say just, but you're engineering words. But when you're engineering, physical things and parts and pieces and how you're cutting pieces of wood or injection molding plastic, it's a whole nother level of engineering. It's three-dimensional, every single part, right?
It takes time, and every prototype takes that extra little bit of time. Yeah. And the thing with the Noodle Pod is like every time you change a little thing. So we had to test to the international standards for over 50 different designs, right? And each one of those designs. So for instance, if it's like a ride-on scootery type thing, in the safety standard, that has its own set of requirements. And then if it's a rocking horse or a slide or a climbing frame or whatever, they all have their own requirements. And we had to test, if I change this ride-on to be like this, is that going to affect any other of these standards? It's hard to explain the level of kind of, for someone like me who likes to, I've got tons of ideas, moving, going back and being super diligent, and when we finally got that safety testing earlier this year back, and they just said, yep, bill of health for every area. I mean, just like, it was one of those moments where I just went, okay, I give myself permission to take a minute to just go, we made it to this. This has been so hard, just so many iterations, so many failures, just the curved arms alone. There's a stack of curved arms I've got that were failures because the configuration of the holes in every curved arm changed by a millimeter every time we changed the box. And so we just had to keep making these things so that they would rock, so they would connect together. It's hard to explain. Yeah, it's just exhausting.
I mean, I feel like the success, people look at the success of your crowdfunding campaign and go, wow, 309,000 Australian dollars over the course of 30 or 40 days, however long you ran it. What an overnight success. But obviously it was like, you laugh. It's 15 years in the making, right?
Yeah.
Or more. And one of the key things that's I'm hearing from your story is it's that constant iteration with your customers, your target demographic, that led to that, what we call product market fit, right? What else would you say contributed to the success of your crowdfunding campaign? What worked?
I think community makes a big difference. So first of all, I'd say Facebook ads work. Do not underestimate how much money you will need to spend on advertising to get this thing out there. And, it might be Facebook today, it might be TikTok tomorrow, it might be, whatever, I don't know, but whatever it is that's working, that is a relentless daily exercise of hearing people's feedback. We got like, if you allow me just to sojourn into
go ahead.
not the haters, but the feedback that you get from those ads. Do not ignore that. Like a classic one was, dude, I had to wait 30 seconds to see kids playing with the toy. You spent all this time explaining it, right? That's a hard bit of feedback because we'd spent tons of time making the video. So then we made it, we quickly cut together a video, which had just all kids playing. And we took my audio and just put it behind the video. It didn't work. That's what's so interesting. Sometimes you get this feedback and you're like, oh man, I've got to do this right. So we tried it, and actual fact, my droning, boring description of the product, people actually listened to it. It annoyed some people and they didn't like some of my points. They didn't like the fact that I said it replaces all your toys. And people were like, it doesn't replace a soft toy. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. Fair point. It doesn't replace a soft, snuggly teddy that you have in bed. Yeah, but you've got 10 of them and everyone's got 10 of them. But it replaces all the large scale. So I started saying it replaces all the large scale toys that are cluttering up your bedroom. Just these little tweaks in your language that help customers, people, to just sort of get past those little things that can irritate them and go, oh, this guy's just talking what rubbish. Really listen to that stuff. And then the other thing we did was I really engaged with people who were critical, So some people said, your toy sucks, it's beige, and I'm like, fair call. Like it looks, like it has two colors. It has blue and it has these, this timber color. And I had to work out ways of communicating to those people. So I'd say, you're right. Our testing, it doesn't have a lot of color, but that's deliberate. And our testing showed that if you put, classic primary colors screaming on every edge, all these bright colors, first of all, for some kids, when you join that up to 50 toys in a bedroom, it's like a unicorn came in and vomited in your room. It's awful, right? It creates a space that's not calm. It creates a space for parents that drives them nuts, and they find quite, for some parents, quite anxiety producing, stressful, all this kind of crazy madness. So we just pushed back and we just said, does everything have to scream color? I mean, it's not like our world is so devoid of color that a child's irises and eyeballs are not going to be well developed to see color. We're not lacking it. I mean, you could just teach a kid that with the plastic bags and wrapping that comes with things that, products that come into the home. We're not, and so we just, I actually engage with those people. Don't be afraid. And there were tons of people who, when we did that, who were like, okay, you get that face. I don't know if people are listening audio, but I don't know what you call this face, that, when they go, yeah, in their mind, they're going, fair call. I got it. That makes sense to me now. I didn't think at that point, but now you've explained it to me. We don't need color, bright, stimulating, flashing lights, colors, electronic sound, batteries. We don't need that for everything. And we're not trying to be all things to all men. We are a creativity toy, and we are a toy replacement toy that creates all these things, and you just got to stick to what are those clear messages? So to answer another part of your question, we really had two things. We're the Nüdel Pod. We reduce clutter by replacing all of those toys in one box. That gets that first look. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because I've seen, I saw my cousin Sarah's room. She's got two little kids, and their house is a nightmare, and I don't want to do that, right? So they're going to go, yeah, I don't want that. I don't want that thing over there. So and then we say, and those toys are better quality and more environmentally friendly. And they're like, that's pretty good. So that's that sort of the clutter. It replaces all your toys. And then the second point was, it helps your child develop and be their little quirky selves, because it allows them to create the things that are of interest to them. And it creates this kind of on-time development. So when they're ready to learn something and practice something, and their brain's like screaming at them to do something, our toy is ready for them to take on that challenge. Whether it's a balancing activity or a cognitive activity or a drawing activity, whatever, it's there to scaffold whatever that thing is. You get that, So that really crystallizing what it is that you're doing, and just say it. We go to these kids and baby shows, and we can tell how many conversations we have by the number of blocks of flyers we give away. Me and my colleague Scott, we go to these shows. It's 250 conversations each in 6 hours. It's like 10, 15 seconds. And that, I tell you what, that helped. That helped to really just drill and refine those messages, so that you really, I talk about this all the time. I do this hand action with my staff all the time. I'm pointing to my chest. You've got to hear and empathize with the person that you're talking to. And then there's some people who are just going to get it straight away. Then you've got to hear and empathize with the people who are on the edge. And then there's a bunch of people who just say, we literally had people just being like, but I want my kid to have 50 plastic toys. I want them to have constant. And I'm like, okay, you enjoy that. There's a nightmare down the road that you're going to hit, right? It's a nightmare having to manage and deal with the clutter in a person's home. You go do that. It's fine. I'm not going to argue with you.
Right. Now your target demographic, and you're okay with it.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. If someone, it's just, you just got to work it out, and not let that. Don't let it ruffle your feathers. There's a lot of people, I imagine, just as sort of a, I'm 47. If there's young people getting into Kickstarter, and maybe some of them have got ADHD, bit of rejection, sensitive dysphoria, stuff like that. You've got to just say, we're not for everyone. Even though I think this is the greatest thing on earth, it's okay. Not everyone's going to love it. Kevin, you said something just before we started this call. What did you say? Something about, we tend to hyper focus on those few negative messages and not pick up, the positive stuff. Like, I was just saying to you, this beautiful thing where we found cheaper shipping for some of our customers. And so we decided to pass that on to them just to love them. There were some people who are really struggling with the cost of shipping in addition to the cost of the product, because it's not cheap. And we found some cheaper shipping for some customers in Hawaii who are in really remote places and some other places. And some of them wrote back and just said, you know what, take it as a tip. You guys are awesome. I've just absolutely, loved following them with their journey. One person said, I've never been so invested in this story, in a product, in my life. And, I have these little markers in my mind that when I get hit, when I'm tired, when you've just been going for days and days on end relentlessly, just to go, I've got to remember those people. Those people are what holds you up and keeps you going through those times where you just, when you're dealing with a sheet of 1,000 addresses and you've got to ship to them all and you want to make sure that they're all right. It's those days where you just go, yeah, yeah. I've got a whole community of people who we've gathered along the way like a snowball, and those people are loving me and I'm loving them back, and that really helps.
Yeah. And I mean, having been a product creator myself and having launched a crowdfunding campaign with actually 7,000 backers, I can tell you that,
Dude, I can't even imagine.
the customer service is no joke, but also I would say 99% of those people are the people that build you up. That's why they're part of that crowdfunding community, and they're willing to, support your project, follow along, be emotionally invested. How did you build that community? So you mentioned Facebook ads worked, and I want to come back to that, but what else worked in building the community for you?
So pre-campaign, so I already had the community of Playground Ideas. So that was, 50,000 people on Facebook. And I'm kind of tentative in even saying that because probably some people are going to listen to this podcast and be like, dude, I don't have that many people. Like how they weren't actually that helpful. I got to say, like, I mean, they're great people. Sorry, I don't mean, I'm not insulting them. They like, here's my big learning. The people who you reach through ads are the people that the algorithm has defined are ready to hear your message, right? So even though they cost you money to send an ad to versus, your mom and your dad and your sisters and all your extended network, hardly any of those people are at that exact moment in their lives where they're having children, they're thinking about children, they've got a 1, 2, 3-year-old, whatever. If you take all of those people, hardly any of them are going to be right in that spot, unless you've got something universal, like, I don't know, toilet paper, and so Facebook ads really actually help to build that community. You'll be pleased to hear this. The Launch Boom kind of method, I guess, of getting people's email and then nurturing that community through weekly emails. We also created something which worked really well called the Pod Squad. So we actually gave it a name. I know that I remember hearing ages ago, Lady Gaga has a name for her community. So we called them the Pod Squad, right? And they loved it. I think that it connected them to that. They could join a private Facebook group where we were nurturing them, talking to them. I was sharing, failures and successes and new designs. And, oh man, look, I just put this thing together. I created a digger, and people were like, cool, I just showed this to my son, daughter, whatever. They loved it. Can you send more of those things? And so those engaging things where people really feel like they're like, people write to me like they know me. They call me by name. They talk to me. They tell me about something they saw. There's a real genuine sense of connection with people, like those weak, they're not best friends, but I think they call them weak networks. They're the people that who know things about you. And they know more than just, that you're a toy company. They know, I've really tried to be honest with people to sort of, share both so regularly, but the failures and the successes and the joy and the struggle of all of that to give people a really clear, like a rounded idea of who we are. And then after the campaign, so something we're doing now to build the community, because here's another big lesson. People love you before the campaign, but when the manufacturing process starts, that period where people have to wait, people start getting a bit shirty, right? There are some people who forget that you're a Kickstarter campaign and they think this is just an e-commerce online Amazon purchase. Where the hell's my stuff? And for us, that is intense because every day we wait, they are watching their kids get older. So we it's very different. So we unlike some dude you're selling some bushcraft knife, like I back the that electric surfboard fin. It took 4 years to get, right? Now, I didn't have a 1-year-old when I started and a 5-year-old when I got it, because that would really, that's terrible, right? Where with us, we've got to deliver quickly. So I'm proud to say that at this stage, we said we were going to ship on the last day of June. We're just about to ship. Like we've already shipped all of our product to the shipping agent who's just organizing so the shipping process has happened. So we're running about 2 weeks after what we promised. So you've got to empathize with your community about what they need, and you've got to keep that community engaged and happy and excited. So just to go back, what I was going to say was we're running this thing called the 100 days, the 100-day challenge. So every day we're up to day on this Friday. So tomorrow will be day 30 of the 100-day challenge, where every day I make a quick little configuration of the pod and we post that. It's just a 1-minute reel. I do about 10 of them at once because I'm just so busy. I've got to set up the studio, and that's why I've got this nice pink backdrop, and I've got some little carpet here. But yeah, that is really helping. We're deliberately doing it to keep people positive and to keep them sort of engaged in what we're doing in this painful period. I get it, while they're waiting. They've paid their money, they've now paid their shipping, and they're eagerly, intently waiting for that. And I want to create a sense of anticipation, not a sense of, boredom or whatever.
So, you had a community of 50,000 people in a Facebook group from Playground Ideas. Do you know roughly how much revenue that drove versus your advertising drove to your crowdfunding campaign?
I don't know the exact figures, but my gut feeling would be almost nothing, almost negligible. And that's not because they didn't love us. It's not because they didn't care for us and want to support us. It's just because you've got to find people in the right window, right? So most of the community that we built, that's over the last 10 years, even if they joined when they were 20, 22 years old to build a playground when they did their university trip or whatever, they're 35 now, right? Or whatever. So maybe some of them are having babies, but yeah, you've got to find people it's not just the right people who love what you're doing. It's the right time is so important, the right time in their life, So yeah, and we've also got other factors like just inflation right now. People are pulling in their belts, and so we've had to sort of change our messaging a little bit with that. The idea of you can go out and buy 50 toys, but you're probably going to spend between $2,000 and $10,000 on those toys, or you can buy one thing. Yes, it's expensive, but it's a smart investment. And that I feel like that is a deeply true statement, but it popped up the priority list because it's more important to the people I'm connecting to.
Yeah. What about the advertising that you mentioned? How much revenue was generated from the advertising? How much did you spend on it?
We spent about 60,000 Australian dollars on ads, which is no joke. So that's what I was saying before. Don't underestimate, to build that community. Which is, I don't know what that is, 45,000 US dollars, something like that. And that before the campaign, if there was one regret, actually, when you get that cost per purchase to a point that fits with the price point of your product, hear me. If you're listening to this podcast, do not hesitate to spend more money. I can't reiterate that more. I wish we'd spent $100,000 if we had it before the campaign, because there's this building, there's a little bit of word of mouth, there's more comments as you get closer. And you start to understand things more. So start advertising early and start with a really low, like our VIP club at that stage was $1. Now, I should say, we're probably going to lose money with those $1 Kickstarter campaigns, but we learned a lot about the algorithm. Got a lot of people in that really taught us about who those people were. And then we increased the VIP club membership up to $20 US in the end. Because we were just to find customers, because it's a high price product, to help mitigate some of that cost. We just had to increase the VIP cost because we just didn't have the money. But we did get to the point, and this is like mind-boggling. We got to the point towards the end of the campaign in Feb where we would often make in VIP payments, we would make a similar amount to what we were spending. So we were spending $600 a day, which again is about $450 US a day, which is a lot of money and is terrifying. But in those VIP memberships, that was really helping to mitigate the kind of impossible stretch of reaching all of those people as we, sprinted towards that late February date of the campaign. But if I had the money, I would have spent more because the other thing is with your system, with the Launchboom system, which, I don't receive any benefit for doing this. There's lots of things. There's tons of people who contact you with ideas. Hardly any of them actually really add value. Your system, without it, would have been a total failure. So it's not cheap to do, depending on how big you are. But for us, it felt like a lot, and also because we're Australian dollars. But without a doubt, the simplicity for customers to come in, get the message on one page, put in their email, pay for their VIP, emotionally connect, join the Facebook group, and go through that process and get ready for the Kickstarter it's hard to explain. It's at least 4 or 5 inches of the concrete of the foundation of the project. So just kudos to you guys. Absolutely incredible. But the other thing is that, we made it over 40, whatever, it was a month-long campaign. To be honest, the other thing is, and this again, hindsight's 2020, we could have made that campaign 4 days long. Everybody purchased in the first little while. The pain of waiting for the campaign to end in the last 15 days, where we had 30 or 40, sales that we kind of just didn't plan and go. We could have run a much shorter campaign and then followed up with people, kept running the ads, and let them buy through a Shopify website or whatever. If I could live my time again, I would have made the campaign as short as possible. But no one's going to do that. I get it from before that. If you've never done it before, you're never going to do that because you're like, I want to milk everything out of that. But you've got to remember, you can follow up with people after the campaign and they can make kind of launch special payments afterwards. There's nothing wrong with that,
Marcus, you mentioned, so you started out with those dollar deposits, right? To get data, and you said you would advise people to like start sooner, start testing, gather that data. And then at what point did you have this statistically significant data to tell you, hey, for every dollar I'm spending, I'm actually generating multiple dollars back in revenue that is profitable, right? For you to continue to spend, because you didn't start out and going, okay, I have $45,000. I'm going to spend that into advertising.
No way. Oh, that would have been, there's no way I would have committed to that. I was expecting maybe 10.
That's what I have from our conversation, actually. $10,000, what you said. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, and that would have had a $10,000 result.
Right.
And so it's a really good question. The combination of Facebook comments, the kind of, oh my God, this is amazing. That kind of thing. I'm totally on board. And then when those people were in the private Pod Squad group, when the hubbub started, the conversation started, hey, could you build a rocket ship? Could you, you could see that engagement. These people are, it took probably 6 or 8 weeks to really feel from people that they were invested in this. They were absolutely going to buy. And that anxious sense of risk reduced. That's the thing that as a founder or as the CEO, the person running it, I don't think there was any specific kind of bit of feedback where you go, or like a metric, like a data hard metric where you go, right, we can do this. And if you look at the spending we did on ads, it just went up in a curve. It probably, there was a more of a sharper curve towards the end. And that was just as a result of the confidence rising and also getting those VIP payments in. We just plowed that all back in, right? Because it was just we're building a community, right? So we just were like, we're not trying to make money here. We're just trying to build a community around this important thing. Yeah. So yeah, there was no specific piece of data, but definitely again, I was personally involved on a daily basis of clearing out those messages and responding in depth, sometimes paragraphs to Facebook comments, to people who are saying, oh, what about this? And, things like for a parent, are there choking hazards in this? You have to answer that question, right? You can't leave it because they're going to walk away and they might go, oh, there might be choking hazards. But then when someone else brings it up to them, they go, oh, I saw this ad. What do you think of this? They're like, oh, well, I don't know if there might be choking hazards. Whereas if you can answer that question and then there's a word of mouth, someone goes and talks about it, that you have to be onto that stuff. And although there'd be a lot of founders who are just like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's one of the sort of few cues in those early days that gives you that on the ground sense that are you connecting with people or not,
Yeah. So it's a stair-step approach, it sounds like, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you started with a couple $1,000s that you were anticipating that you would spend on testing and optimization at $1. And then you eventually, increased it to $20 when you had good enough metrics. And then you got those $20 and you recycled that back in. And then maybe you pulled from your cash reserves because you saw the comments and the overwhelming feedback from the customers. And that's really what led to, the $45,000 in dollars spent.
Yeah. And when someone's spending $20
Yeah. On a reservation, not even on a product. Yeah.
on not even that's a commitment, right? So when we got to that point and we didn't see a significant drop off, and if there are some people who own a pod who are like, yeah, I hated those VIP payments. I get it. Some people didn't like it. They didn't like giving their email, and signing up. But what we were doing was creating a community. And as much as people didn't like it when they were in and they paid their money, and then we offered them genuine, it sounds a bit sort of wanky, but genuine value. I really talked to these people. We made videos. We had people saying, can you make me a rocket ship? And I said, yes. Here's a video just for you. My kid loves race cars or, at the moment they're just obsessed with ball tracks, like balls running down a little, Rube Goldberg. I made those things and I shared those videos and people went, I paid my $20. I didn't like that. But now that I've met this person and I'm invested in the whatever, this is worth it for me, and in return, I was like, we are pulling the trigger on this. This is happening, like, cause in the very early days, there is an element of like, I can just give those VIP payments back, just refund them, call it quits. This is not working. People hate it. You've got that kind of red pin that you can pull in the early days. And, obviously no one, all that work, no one wants to do that. But if it's really a flopping, it's sort of in the back of your mind, am I going to invest all this money and just waste it all? I don't want to do that because I remember I run a charity. I can't be, messing around with that kind of stuff. But yeah, so the VIP payments helped, the comments helped, and it was just a blending of all those things that really created a sense that we're good to go here.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about the stuff that worked, and I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing all that stuff, Marcus. What is a mistake that you made or a mistake that you see other people make?
Let me take this. I've got a friend of mine who designs fashion clothes. And one of the biggest struggles that she has is that she's designing summer clothes in winter and winter clothes in summer. And it's hard. It's hard to get into the groove of what that's going to look like. But at every stage, you need to be thinking about the next stage as a reality, not as as soon as you see that Kickstarter campaign successful, you need to start thinking about shipping. Right? You need to think about manufacturing. And when you're manufacturing, you need to think about shipping. And at every stage, I've always had like a leapfrog approach. We did this with the playgrounds in Thailand as well. We started designing and planning the next playground, about these little things I'm getting. We started designing and building those playgrounds before we would leapfrog. So we would stop one playground for a day or two, go to the next community, do the planning, and then go back to that other playground and finish it. So we were ready to do the next one. So we're literally doing it all back to back. But you really need to, and it's sometimes hard to genuinely go, to a shipping agent or whatever and go, I'm about to send, I need to pay, how much, like $70,000 for shipping all these things. I mean, that's terrifying, right? But you've got to go, well, I've got this many products and they're going to be shipped all over the world. This is big bickies. And I need to start genuinely talking about that to people now,
Right.
because everything takes that little bit longer than you expect, and that will drive your backers mad. Because if you promise that you're going to ship then, and then there's a delay, a little delay, but when you delay and delay and delay, that kills people. So I've really felt like that. We've not in a big way, but I feel personally responsible that sometimes we probably aggressively communicated deadlines that were real at the time, but I probably should have pushed them out by a week or a few days or whatever, so that I wouldn't have to come back and say, hey, we had this thing that went wrong. We had to, so we had one issue where our screw supplier just supplied us with screws that didn't work. The head on them just did not, you couldn't put the tool in deep enough to get the thing to work, and so I had to get 52,000 screws remade. That cost us 2 weeks, so just factor in things are going to go wrong, yeah. Yeah. And I don't have this problem with with the Noodle cart and rover. We already had a bunch of manufacturers lined up we have 14 manufacturers to make one pod, but we had used most of them before in making the cart and rover. So I trusted those people. I had relationships with them, whatever. That takes time. It takes time to build those relationships. And if you can, if you can go to where those manufacturers are and meet them, get prototypes made early, and feel like that they can deliver, all that stuff is really important. So that was one thing that we didn't need to do as much, which for a lot of other Kickstarters, I think can be a huge stumbling block. It's just issues with manufacturers, delivering on time, delivering the quality that you want. And then I think one other thing, again, I think we've done okay on this, but I've learned along the way, when you're talking to manufacturers, shipping agents, whatever, don't be afraid to go back and say, that doesn't seem like the quality we discussed. That doesn't quite, that shipping cost, if I add that up times 1,000, that's not going to work for us. I'm sorry. There's been a lot of times where we've got quotes for things where they say, they just say, it's a little bit more expensive. Don't be afraid to go back and say, what exactly happened to US backers at tier 3 that their shipping went up by $10? Because that $10 times all of our customers is a huge, don't be afraid. And each one of those little steps, if you let them go, that can really snowball into a disaster for you, where you actually end up, people would look at the pod and go, my gosh, it's such an expensive product, right? It's a really premium class, Rolex watch of a toy, right? To be honest, and my backers, if they watch this, they would be shocked by this. There are lots of products that we are shipping out where we're not making a cent by the end of it. If you take the $1 VIP payment, the super early bird pricing, the shipping costs to certain locations, remote areas in Canada, Hawaii, and other places, and the amount we're paying, there'd be some people that we're even probably paying them to take a pod, and I know that sounds completely ridiculous for a $400 toy, but when you add up quality, customer service, shipping, all that stuff, and all the social media that we pay to, the ads and not the ads, the content that we make for our pod squad, all that stuff, when you add up all the staffing and all that stuff, it's hard to actually create something that's sustainable. We're running on a knife edge all the time. And most companies, I think, with inflation now are doing that.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really great insight for our backers. On the other hand, though, I don't want to scare creators. I think
No.
I think something else.
They're going to do it anyway, Kevin. They're going to do it anyway.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. I think another thing too is like the crowdfunding campaign is just one stair step along the way, right? And maybe you can talk a little bit about, Marcus, like, okay, well, why crowdfunding and what would be the alternative to it that you would be considering? I mean, taking into account all the challenges that you just mentioned, but also on the other side of it, like, what are some of the benefits and why do you choose crowd?
I'm going to say something controversial.
Hmm.
If I had to do this again, I would use Launchboom. Absolutely. And again, there's no connection between you and me. I don't need to say that.
Right.
Whether I would use a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter, honestly, how much value they added is very hard for me to actually genuine. And Kickstarter's been amazing. It's changed the world. The amount of innovations created, whatever. But for the fees and for all the complexity, if there was a simple website that I could set up where people could just make a pledge on a Shopify site or whatever, is that controversial? Honestly, like for 30 grand that we lost in fees or whatever it was, it's no joke. That probably the most painful fee I've paid in all of this.
Mm.
For 30 grand, I could set up a kick-ass website that would last me forever, you know? So I think the Launchboom system, without a doubt, the simplicity, all that stuff. But but whether I'd use Kickstarter again, I don't know. Sorry, tell me the question again. I want to make sure I answer that.
No, no. And I think that's a fair point, by the way. You kind of answer the question, so it's all good, Marcus. Um, it it's really a fair point. Like the platform itself, for some products, it doesn't drive a ton of, additional revenue or sales, and they're just taking an additional percentage on top of what you've already paid to acquire those customers, right?
And yeah, that's right. And why doesn't it drive a bunch of stuff? I mean, we certainly got some Kickstarter things, but if I took that 30 grand and put it into Facebook ads, in fact, there you go. That's your answer.
Yeah.
Without a single doubt, if I would do it again, if I could create a Kickstarter type arrangement on a web page, because my customers were already in, but pre-campaign, like, sorry, there was one thing I forgot that I wanted to bring up from one of your questions before. When we started the private Facebook group, you can ask questions and interview people as they're coming into that group. And one of those questions was, how likely are you to purchase a pod? I forgot about that. That was such anyone listening to this, do that. When you start to stack up people who click that button that say, absolutely, I'm going to buy one. Not maybe, because we've got tons of people who said no. We've got tons of people who said maybe after the campaign, so we had sort of a layered thing where we could genuinely ask people. It was a friendly question. You've obviously come here because you're interested in it, but actually, how likely are you? They had paid their VOP payment to purchase. Once I'd stacked up enough of those, and then I took a percentage of those. Like I can't remember what I said, but I think you guys have some stats about that. Like for the amount of people who've paid the VIPs. Actually, that was the other thing. You told us some calculations, right? There was 3% of people who registered their emails, and
33% roughly.
Yeah. So we had a background spreadsheet where every day we would count the number of VIPs, the amount we spent, blah, blah, blah. And we had a little calculation in the spreadsheet, super boring, which was like, how many people paid for their VIP today times point. I think we actually, towards the end, we were only counting 0.25, like 25% of those people. And then how many people signed up with their email? And we counted 0.03, so 3%. And that spat out an end of the month figure. And we were not, like, that calculation wasn't far off.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was the data that, gave you confidence to spend more than a few $1,000s.
Yeah, I totally forgot about it. So we had all these, we actually had heaps of data. So we had that spreadsheet, and we had the Facebook interview stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess when I asked the question of like, let's just so the fees that you're talking about, just to clarify for the audience, it's 5%, right? Platform fees that Kickstarter or Indiegogo charge if you were to use the platform. And then there's credit card transaction fees.
And they are also no joke. Yeah. I think they worked out to be about 3% or something. Yeah. It was about 30, it's about 10%, I think, in the end when you factor all the little bits and pieces in, which is a lot.
Yes, absolutely is a lot.
Bit less than, actually, sorry, it was a bit less, maybe 8, 9.25, somewhere around there. Somewhere.
Yeah, so that's the almost $30,000 that essentially you're talking about that you could have potentially funneled back into advertising to generate more revenue. So I guess the question I was asking, Marcus, was crowdfunding. Like, let's just even take the platforms out of the picture, right? Kickstarter, Indiegogo, but just the concept of crowdfunding, right? Running the ads, building up the community around a launch event, whether it's on your Shopify site or on Kickstarter, whatever it is. There's a lot of positives to it, right?
Without a doubt. Yeah, yeah. I think it's just setting a date, right?
Right.
You're not putting it off. This is happening on this date.
Yeah.
Like in your mind, you kind of, once you set that thing in motion, you start running towards a date. And once you're running the ads and stuff, you've committed to people. And so you can't make any excuses. You can't, and they have emotionally committed to doing something, right? So like, would I run a Kickstarter type, crowdfunding type event? Absolutely. Would I run it through Kickstarter or Indiegogo or one of those platforms again? That's the bit that I'm not sure about, because you can set up a site that has multiple different products, essentially, which are the different levels.
Yeah. I don't think that's controversial, Marcus.
Good.
I don't think that's controversial. I think it really just depends on the products as well, right?
Totally. And if you were running a board game, because, for instance, or like some sci-fi figurine, whatever, I'd be like, dude, go to Kickstarter. I mean, there is literally 100 million people who want to buy those things.
Yeah.
With Kickstarter, 50%, I think less than 50% of the people who purchased our thing had ever even heard of Kickstarter, because, Kickstarter gives you a bit of a statistic in the back. So there were lots of people who didn't understand that, and we had to be very clear about what is a Kickstarter. We did a lot of posts around how does it work, and we gave a step-by-step, click these buttons to get in there, to register early, because we saw that we didn't have that higher. But if you're running a board game, it's probably 80, 90% of people who purchased through Kickstarter. I don't know, or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have, the reason why I say it's not controversial is because we don't have a dog in the fight, Marcus. The same system applies to Kickstarter, Indiegogo.
Absolutely. And it totally would. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter to us here at Launchboom. So, but what I'm trying to get at is, the benefits of, building that community in advance, getting that pre-order cash flow up front, the email list, the reservation list, the Facebook, all the stuff that you talked about, Marcus. I just want to highlight that for product creators and inventors.
It's not the game. The game is the pre-game. Kickstarter is not the game. That's the end of the game. The game is finished. You're all off having drinks, right? You're drinking Gatorade. You're not people, like there was another, I don't want to mention it, but there was another product that had almost exactly the same name as us, running on Kickstarter from New York at the same time. He thought the game was day one of the campaign, and his advertising, he got a sort of marketing company who did a bit of Kickstarter stuff as well as other things. They weren't specialists. And this was his second failure. And I was like, dude, I can feel your pain. He's put in all this effort and he's just grinding every day towards the end of that Kickstarter campaign. He didn't realize that day one of the campaign is all that matters. If you're not successful in that day, trying to rush around and stress, the amount of stress that you would have trying to make that campaign successful towards the end, don't do that. Like, just don't. The game has ended on day one or day three, probably, realistically. And I'm not, that's not hyperbole. I'm not being cocky. That is absolutely a key learning. Like, if you can't see that campaign being successful the second it opens, then stop, extend the Kickstarter date, start over, don't keep going. And that's another one that I'm like, if you hear two things, this is the second thing, do not launch if you don't have a sufficient community that paid their VOP, that's got into your group, that's excited, you can feel it, that it's going to work. Don't do it. Because a failed campaign on Kickstarter, everyone's going to see it every time they search your name. Don't do it.
That's wonderful advice, man. I just want to ask you for one more piece of advice before we wrap up here, Marcus. You have a family, you have a beautiful daughter, and I don't want to take you take too much of your time. But you talked about burnouts, your first burnouts after setting up 40 playgrounds. How did you deal with that, and how did you come back to do, was it 15 more years of this and leading you to this points of launching your crowdfunding campaign, building community, multiple successful products? I mean, because a lot of people get stuck there for a very, very long.
Yeah, I think you've got, there are points where you've just got to be very, very conscious of stopping. Like my partner booked for us to go to the snow. Kids have been talking about the snow. My partner grew up as a sort of in the snow. And I actually felt quite guilty about it. We're right in the middle of, a lot of manufacturing and stuff, but, and some people won't understand this. They'll just say, dude, suck it up. Just keep going. You're grinding. But I have so many of my friends who've tried to do things and they just don't take a beat to reset the constant adrenaline that you're in, right? And if you're listening to this, you've never started anything, you've never whatever, can you just make an assumption right now? You don't know what I'm talking about. The founders who've started big things and put everything on the line, it is a constant tension, like nervous tension, where you are running right on the edge of a razorback cliff where you can fall either side at any moment with a simple wrong move. And everything's on the line. You've got your backpack with your kids in it, right? It's high risk. And so taking that trip, putting my phone away for sort of 48 hours, that it's taking those little steps along the way. And then after, I was quite young when I was doing the playgrounds in Thailand. And when we finished up there, I kind of found a few people to keep that going. We're all kind of volunteers. We weren't anything, and it was exhausting. I kind of got people to do that. And I we went to Europe. We didn't have a lot of money. And we had a friend of ours there who we'd met in Thailand who helped us to buy a camper van. And we just literally schlepped around Europe for spending nothing. Like we literally go to the local markets, get fresh fruit and veg, spent nothing. We saw what was happening in the restaurants and we just cook it in our van. That was cheaper than living back in Melbourne at that time. So we went straight to Thailand, did that for 9 months. And I really needed that because I'd been working in my 20s. I'd been killing myself, just grinding away at my mountain guiding stuff and then straight onto hands-on learning. And then straight onto building 40 playgrounds in blazing heat. I got dengue fever. There's more to that story. Like there's tons of stuff there. And young people don't know how to manage that stuff yet. And I certainly didn't. I was just going a million miles an hour. And so just taking those steps is you got to do it, otherwise you will kill yourself. You'll wreck your system. There are bits in your brain, you'll just break them and you'll end up having like whether they call it a nervous breakdown or whatever. You'll get to a point where you just can't wake up. You can't get out of bed in the morning, and I'm older now. I can start to feel those signs where you just like, you don't sleep well, you don't go to bed early enough. You start waking up super early and you can feel that descent and you just need to make sure you just take a minute,
So before people like hit that brick wall and need to take 9 months off sleeping around, which sounds amazing, by the way.
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, it wasn't all for that, but honestly, that was almost a little bit of an accident. Back then, I didn't really pick up the signs that I was really struggling.
Uh-huh.
But as soon as I landed on the ground and we had that van and that first morning where I was just like, I don't have to do anything right now. I just don't have any demands on my time. That was really, then I started to recognize I am so, I probably slept for a week, just comatose, because my body was just so exhausted.
Wow. What are some signs that people can pay attention to before they hit that brick wall that they can address? And what are some things that you do on a daily or weekly or monthly basis to help you prevent you from hitting that brick wall?
Well, I think I can answer the first part of that question better than the second part, like what I'm doing, because it's hard, right? Because you got all these demands, right? But I think the first thing for me, I notice I start getting headaches, and I think that's partly because I carry a lot of, I clench my jaw when I'm getting, when there's a lot going on. It's just unconscious that I'm doing that. Definitely sleep. I end up sleeping 5 hours a night. I'll stay up on my phone too late answering questions, because you're working with people all over the world. So that stuff is it's a fire hose coming in. So you can literally do it 24/7 and it never stops. What else do I notice? Yeah, just getting short with my kids, not having the patience to just parent well, and just, I've got two pretty hyperactive son and daughter, and that's pretty relentless, and just picking up on my shortness with them. Just being able to stop, when you're in that hyper state, being able to stop and listen to a slow, quiet conversation about my partner's workday. Yeah, I notice sometimes when I'm really into it, my brain is just going boom, 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 all over the place. And being able to just focus on one thing, that's another really big sign as well. It's just that ability to have that, not be flipping around all the time. So that's a few things. And then to mitigate those things, I think everything I read says that exercise makes a difference. So I've actually just I picked up I saw a guy who was throwing out this treadmill. And I said, "Does that work?" And he's like, yeah, I just can't fit it in the house. Oh no, it was his grandfather's who passed away. He said, "Yeah, you can take it." So I've now got a treadmill next to my desk. So I've set up a standing desk over the top of it, and I've got a screen, and I can just talk to people while I'm just walking, just to get my heart rate up, just to get that flexibility and juiciness back into your body, So exercise, I think, is the number one thing, to be honest. If you can just do an extra amount of steps, even if you can't afford to go to the gym, which I'm not doing, and I probably should, or playing sports every week or whatever, just getting a little bit of heart rate rise whilst you're working. I've got a phone call for an hour, do it while you're walking. I think Americans are kind of a bit better than, just that kind of understanding that we're super busy, and we're trying to fit that in. Yeah. And I think for everyone else, it's going to be different. But I think your body knows the score. You often feel it in your body, and just pay attention to those things, around your neck and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's really, really good. I mean, the jaw clenching and like the ability to just even have a conversation with your loved ones. If you can't do that, you got to address that, right? I mean, 'cause what is life all about? Like, are you actually going to remember the email that you haven't gotten back to, or that you got back to a day late to someone? Or are you going to remember, or are you going to be remembered for you being present, when your spouse needs?
It's really, just as a final point, I totally agree with you. But there's another part of me, and some people are going to probably kill me for this, but like, hard things. If you want to start something that's never existed before, and I know that sounds a bit wanky, but if we've designed something that's never been here before to convince people that that's a real thing that they could actually have, um, it just takes an enormous amount of effort. And there's a part of me that I don't want all these people feeling super guilty for just hyper focusing on that thing that they want to see that change in. But I totally understand your point. You know what I mean? Like, it is just, there are sacrifices that you make to start things, and there are people in the world who are going to do amazing physical changes or social changes in the world, and not everything fits all the time. And there's also a part of me that's just gone, this period, I am definitely making some sacrifices. And just making sure I balance those things, as opposed to, and not getting into that kind of shut down, kind of feel terrible. I feel guilty that I didn't get to see my family today, and just going, I'm going to hyper focus on, I have to do that thing right now. And family, I'm really sorry, but I am going to commit to making that up at some other time, and just trying to balance it that way, instead of going, I'm trying to be all things to all men all the time. because I think that will kill you. You'll just feel so guilty and ashamed of yourself and letting everyone down and whatever. It's hard. It's just really hard.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yeah, the compartmentalization, right? That you're talking about. Like,
Yeah. And I know some people are going to hate that. They're going to be like, you can't do that. That's hyper masculine. And, you can't put your family in a little box. But you really are just juggling these big, big, heavy, serious things that have major consequences, And I think that it's hard that some people can't handle that truth that when you're dealing with, you had 7,000 backers, that's a big responsibility to carry to make sure that you love those people, and I know they're not your family, but they're people. And we're all going through, I had one issue with our bank where the bank just wouldn't receive these payments that we needed. And I was just saying to the bank, I'm like, do you understand? By not solving this problem, I've missed out on my children's time. Yeah, can you please fix this to help us? And we've got that responsibility to lots of people to do those things. And I'm not saying that we should just focus on customers and our businesses and whatever and forget our family. That's ridiculous. But the people around those people who are doing these big things, there are hefty responsibilities on their shoulders. And particularly in the early stages of that, you can't just employ another $100,000 person to make it happen today because you just don't have the money. It's just not there yet. It's really hard. I feel for people, and I don't think there's a right answer.
well, I really appreciate you sharing all that, Marcus. And I want to wrap this up. What are the links that people can learn more about the film that you mentioned, the noodle cart that you built, and obviously the Noodle Pod? It's Nudel, by the way.
Yeah. So Nüdel Pod is obviously the big one at the moment. That's just NUDEL.shop, noodle.shop. Noodle cart. So if you're listening to this and you don't have kids, but you're a teacher or you've got some sort of connection to a school, we make a bigger version called the Noodle Cart and Rover. That's Noodle Cart, NUDELKART.com. And Playground Ideas is playgroundideas.org, where anyone, anywhere can get everything they need to build a playground, including a drag and drop designer for a playground to build a playground, whether it's in your backyard or in the middle of Rwanda.
Beautiful. What about the film that you mentioned in the beginning of the podcast?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So it's called Wheels of Wonder. You can watch the trailer on YouTube. It was available for Australian listeners on SBS. I'm not sure if that's one of our TV channels, if that's available, but you can purchase a ticket at noodlecart.com. There's a film section in the menu where you can purchase a ticket there, and we'll send you a link and you can watch it at home and get a family ticket.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Marcus. Is there anything else you've left so many nuggets and gems with us here today. Is there anything else that you want to leave with audience before we wrap up here?
I think one thing is our stuff is super high quality and it's not cheap. So if you do want to get one and you go, I just can't afford it, I would suggest just spreading that out over a family or spreading it out over a school. So for schools, they can use our film. I can give them the rights to the film to use it as a fundraiser to get one to help them out. And we've got other fundraising ideas. And then for all those sort of starters out there who are willing to take those risks, for me, it's about balance, I guess, balancing like do it, but you have to keep your ears open. Sometimes you can be super focused on what you want to do, but you must listen and connect to the heart of the people you're talking to. Hear them because they will give you the clues of how to help them, right? Because we're all trying to create something that helps someone else. And you want to find something where they feel the passion and love that you have in the world, that in that thing or service or whatever it is that you make. So, really create a community and hear those people, because that will drive you towards the best possible answer for them, and that will if you're loving people, that they'll come back and they'll tell other people about it. And that's all you need.
That's beautiful. That's a great place to wrap up. Thank you so much for your time today, Marcus. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks so much. Yeah, great to chat. All right. See you, mate.